Welcome back to another episode of Live from My Parents' Basement. This week I sat down with my cousins Kyle Mortimer and Wyatt McIntosh to talk about the most underrated NBA players of all time. Some of our picks are pretty good. Some of them are pretty stupid, but we had a good time doing it. We dressed for the occasion. We had a lot of laughs, had a lot of good times, and hope you enjoy it. Kyle, do you actually have on the suit jacket with a jersey?
I do.
With this.
That's freaking amazing.
Larry Bird, Springs Valley, got on the sports jacket.
Yeah. Let's go.
He's come prepared. He's ready. He's ready to talk.
I figure, this is fun, but it's also business. So, we mix that, and here we are.
Yeah, we need to take this seriously, of course.
Yeah. People are it, so we don't want to be thought of as bums.
No, exactly. Wyatt, what are you rocking today?
I got my Dennis Rodman college jersey.
Okay. This is a throwback. This is a LeBron jersey from 2009 that I can still fit into because I haven't grown much since I was like 11 or 12.
Nice.
So this is even pre-Heat era. So this is all before that. But I was able to squeeze into it. But I don't know. This is probably my favorite jersey that I have because it's stitched. It's probably pretty expensive, but I'm happy I have it.
Yeah, it looks good on you. I like it too. I dig it.
Yeah. Okay, so I figured today, the NBA starts up within the next week, and me and Wyatt and Lance already had an episode sort of predicting how we think it's going to go. So I figured we could do something different, talk about who we think probably the underrated players are in the league ever. I know I had difficulty with some, and a few of them aren't really – I think they're underrated. They might not be most people. And I figured we could just go position by position and break them down. So, Kyle, you want to start and talk with, who you think the most underrated point guard is? That'd be good.
Yeah, so I thought about that. I know we talked a little bit before that's probably what we would talk about. And I started thinking back, and I feel like there's people that I could throw out, like from the 60s, 70s, 80s, but I didn't really watch those guys, so I don't know that it's fair that I comment on it a lot. Like I was thinking of like Tiny Archibald. A big one for me would be Oscar Robertson, even though he is talked about a fair amount. I just don't think he's at where he should be. Mm-hmm. Players more familiar with, and I actually watched play. And when it comes to the point guard, I just don't think a lot like Oscar Robertson, right? I think he'll be a modern Oscar Robertson is Jason Kidd, J Kidd. I don't think he gets the respect he deserves. Triple-double machine, could carry teams. And he carried teams early on in his career when they were still really big man focused, and he did a lot. So that's where I would put for my point guard.
That's interesting because I didn't put him as my point guard, and I'm surprised I didn't because Jason Kidd probably is one of my favorite players that's played because I think again he's massively underrated. I think Magic Johnson's the best point guard ever, and I like point guards that sort of just do everything. Scoring isn't their main focus. So when you have a player like Jason Kidd who's pass first, but he also can average 7 rebounds a game with 10 assists and 12 points, I think that's the best type of point guard. So I think that's a really good pick on your part.
Thanks. And I agree real quick before we pass it on. That's one thing that I always use as a barometer for me of the best point guards is that they're pass first. To this day, show me a scoring first point guard that has won titles or multiples. The closest is Allen Iverson back in 2000, I think, when he was with the Sixers. Yeah, 01. But, those guys don't typically win, and they definitely don't make it all the way. So, yeah, I agree with what you said, Sammy.
Yeah, I love the pass first guys. Why? Who do you think? Who do you got?
For my point guard, I put Kevin Johnson. He was super athletic. He was on that team with Barkley that went to the finals. He was one of the only 4 players in NBA history to average 20 points and 10 assists in 3 different seasons. And I just think he's pretty underrated. Nobody really talks about him at all, but he was good.
And he played with Barkley, right?
Mm-hmm. That's when they made the finals against Jordan. He was on that team.
That's what I thought. Yeah, Kevin Johnson's good. I agree with that. That's pretty.
Somebody did their homework. Way to go, Wyatt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for me, my point guard, he's in the Hall of Fame, but I think, in my opinion, the NBA Hall of Fame, or the Basketball Hall of Fame, actually, I don't think it's very strict on who gets in. So even pretty good players get in. I know the Baseball Hall of Fame. There are tons of great players that just don't make it. So I think the NBA Hall of Fame isn't as stringent, but that doesn't really matter with this guy because he should be in there. I'm gonna say Gary Payton because when people talk about the greatest point guards of all time, they go Magic Johnson, John Stockton, Steve Nash, Isaiah Thomas, but no one ever talks about Gary Payton. And I went and looked him. I looked him up the other day and I did my research on him, and it's baffling how many awards he stacked up. He was not for 9 years straight. He made the all-defensive first team. He won Defensive Player of the Year as a point guard. He made 9 All-NBA teams. And it's probably because he played. I mean, when you play in the 90s, you're going to get overshadowed by Jordan and Stockton and just those other guards. I feel, again, he's in the Hall of Fame, but no one ever puts him in the conversation as some of the greatest point guards of all time. He's usually just 6th or 7th down the list, and I think he should probably be higher up than that because he just did so much defensively, and he's a pretty good offensive player and passer as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Gary Payton, I actually considered him as a pick as well, just because he was more known for defense, which generally doesn't get recognized as much in all-time player list.
Yeah, for sure. It's odd because when you talk about the greatest point guards, he's almost never mentioned.
Yeah, no one ever talks about him at all.
Never talks about Gary Payton. All right, Wyatt, how about shooting guards? Who you got there?
For my shooting guard, I put Joe Dumars.
Okay.
I feel like he was really underrated. Like Isaiah Thomas just overshadowed him a lot, but he was a really important part of the team. And he won the Finals MVP when they won it in 1990. Okay. So he made the All-Defensive Team 4 times. Great defender, great scorer. I just feel like kind of overshadowed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know much about Joe Dumars. I don't know. I don't know much about those Pistons team besides they were jerks and Bill Laimbeer was a jerk, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it's funny what you said, though, because one of the other players I considered for my point guard pick was actually Isaiah Thomas, just because I felt, he obviously got left off the dream team. I think a lot of people know that now if they didn't before because of Michael Jordan's The Last Dance, obviously focused on that a little bit. But Joe Dumars, I would agree. I don't know. I didn't watch them enough. Again, I was just born shortly. I mean, I was only a few years old when they were making their runs. I didn't watch him enough, but I don't know any of his stats, I guess, to say that he wouldn't be a pick. I just feel like from the little I know, what I assume, did you look up any of his stats? Why? Let me ask you that. What did he do?
Yeah, he averaged like 16 points and 5 assists.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess you'd be one because, again, no one ever puts him in that category at all. So those are pretty decent numbers on a back-to-back championship team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
And for mine, it's a player I've always admired. He's a Hall of Famer, but he never gets a lot of recognition, and he played for one of the best teams of all time. And Larry Bird said he's the best player I've ever played with, and that would be Dennis Johnson. A lot of people say he's probably the most underrated player, and I agree with that a lot. I mean, he won the only title with the Sonics in the 70s. He's the finalist MVP. He made 2 All-NBA teams. He made 9 All-Defensive teams. I know he really shut down Magic Johnson in the finals. And he really complimented the other players on those teams with Parrish and McHale and Bird, even Danny Ainge. But, I've always really admired Danny Johnson, and he was pretty much the reason I came up with this topic, just because I wanted to talk about him some, because I don't think he gets enough appreciation as a player.
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving on.
Wasn't that his name?
Huh? What?
I just said, wasn't his nickname the Microwave, if I remember right?
I think you're right. Yeah, I think it was something like that. Yeah. And I don't know. I sort of cheated because at the beginning part of his career, he actually did play point guard, but then he did play shooting guard with the Celtics. And he had more accolades with the Sonics and Suns, but I think he's probably the prime of his career with the Celtics. That's where he contributed the most as a player.
Yeah.
And then for small forwards, I was split between 2 guys because there's been
Whoa! Do I not get to pick my shooting guard?
Oh wait,
yeah, Kyle didn't get it yet.
I forgot. Go ahead.
Wow, that's harsh, dude.
I cut you off.
I set out this time in between me pretending to work and me pretending to clean, and here I am getting tossed to the side. Wow.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot.
All right. So, shooting guard. Going to use a little bit more of a modern pick here. Ray Allen. He's been on several good teams, a lot of great teams, but pretty much everywhere he went, he was very rarely the best player, I guess, later in his career. You think about when he joined the Celtics, Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. Most people, I think, would consider the best players on that team. Then going to join LeBron James towards the twilight of his career. But the dude made big shots all the time up until Steph Curry went nuts. I believe he was the leader in attempts and three-point field goals made. He's just a phenomenal player. And I just don't think he gets mentioned very much when you talk about even just best shooters in the game. Not that he does get brought up, but, nowadays you hear, I think, a lot more about Reggie Miller, Steph Curry are often listed and talked about more than he is.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got rings,
Yeah. I mean, that shot he made in the finals 6 years ago, I don't know which one, 2013 to 14 finals. People say that's one of the best shots ever, biggest shots.
Oh, without question.
I remember watching that shot go in, and I was mad because I was wanting – I can't remember if it was the Spurs or Thunder. It was one of those teams to win, but yeah.
It was the Spurs.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you're right. That shot, I think, is what will immortalize him more than his overall body of work, kind of like maybe a John Havlicek, which I think somebody could have mentioned as an underrated point guard. Everybody knows him from the old Havlicek stole the ball, but they don't know him from his playing career and what he actually did. And if you ask people who he played for, I don't think most people even know he played for the Celtics, man. They're just like, oh, yeah, Havlicek stole the ball. Well, against who? Who is he playing for? Nobody knows that.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on to small forwards now since everyone's had their turn. I was being here. Small forwards, I have an odd pick. Probably most people will think it's sort of dumb. And there's been so many great small forwards who's played the game. I was split between – my first choice was Peja Stojakovic, just because he could just shoot and score.
He's awesome.
Just a great shooter. But I ended up going with someone with no accolades, no awards won in the NBA. He still currently plays, but he's been consistent his whole career. And I don't even know if he's the most underrated small forward ever, but I wanted to put him on my list. And that'd be Rudy Gay. He has a career average of 18 points a game and about 7 rebounds, and he's never scored in single digits. He's part of those grit and grind Grizzlies team. Never made an all-star team, never made any all-NBA teams, but he's always been a really solid contributor on every team he's been in. He probably shouldn't even make the Hall of Fame, but I don't know. I mean, he's a pretty decent rebounder. He's a good scorer. I don't know. I think he's been a good addition on any team he's been on. So, I don't know. I just wanted to put him on my list just because I don't think people talk about him enough. And I think if players like Kevin Durant or LeBron weren't playing, he'd probably get a lot more attention as a player.
Yeah.
I can agree with that.
Yeah. All right, Kyle, who you got?
Gonna go again. These get so difficult, right? When we're trying to decide, what qualifies as underrated? Because I think everybody knows who this guy is, even people who aren't following the NBA real closely. But as far as what he did for the game, I think it's underrated. And just because without Scottie Pippen, again, it's easy to look at now that Last Dance just aired, but what he brought, Jordan wouldn't have won all those titles without him, but Jordan gets all the attention. You look at when Jordan left and how well the Bulls did, that season and a half or whatever in between when Jordan left to go play baseball. And Scottie did very well with a team that was, in shambles in a lot of different ways. And that's who I personally would go with in the small forward pick. I also – there's other players I kind of like to throw in there, but they go back and forth kind of with the power forward, small forward aspect. But his all-around game, his defense, offense, and how he could also play the point guard position, which outside of Magic Johnson, who is really tall, But Magic Johnson did play outside. He didn't go inside a lot. Scottie did both, and I think he was the first player to do that well and was really, like the prototype for your LeBron James.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I would – Scottie Pippen is underrated, but I still think he is still considered an all-time great. But I understand why people would still say he's very underrated. I think he's underrated, but yeah.
Well, I think say that, and let me clarify that just a little more. I think because you're not wrong with what you're saying, I always just find it interesting when people talk about the best small forwards of all time, you usually hear LeBron James and Larry Bird. And those are the two that kind of go back and forth. And I've always just found it interesting that Scottie Pippen doesn't even get thrown in that mix. Like, I'm not saying he's on the same level as LeBron, but I do think that he would be there's a debate between him and Larry Bird that could be had. And he's never even brought into that mix.
He did do a lot. He was an excellent defensive player. He could do everything like you were saying. So, I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right with everything you said.
Yeah, he set the mold for those point forward guys.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Exactly. And he just doesn't always get a lot of due for that, I feel like.
Absolutely. All right, Wyatt, who you got?
All right, well, this guy, not a lot of people know about him. His name, Adrian Danley. I feel like he's really underrated because he actually averaged 30 points a game 4 times in a row, and he won the scoring title twice. He averaged 24 points a game over his career. But just nobody talks about him as a great scorer in the NBA.
That's because, like you said, no one knows who he is. I don't know who he is.
I know his name, but yeah.
I do too, yeah.
I had no idea he scored 30 points 4 seasons straight. That's impressive. That's very impressive. Very few.
Yeah, I was just researching stuff last night, and I just saw that. I was like, I have to pick this guy.
Who did he play for? The Hawks or?
He played for Buffalo when he first came in the league in 1976. Then he played for the Pacers one season, Lakers, Jazz, Pistons, and then the Raptors, I think, and then Dallas and Milwaukee at the end of his career.
He's so Pete, he played for half the teams in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating.
I also want to point out Wyatt's clearly cheating. He has a computer that he's using. So you're a cheater, Wyatt, and I hate you.
No, actually, I got my notes here. So they're all written down on my notes on my phone.
Yeah, I have notes written down as well. I'm not memorizing their stats off the top of my head either. I'm with Wyatt.
Oh.
Okay, we'll move on to power forwards then. So Wyatt, who you got?
I put Sean Marion.
Okay.
He was just a really versatile player for a bunch of years. Only player to have, or one of 5 players to record 1,500 steals and 1,000 blocks. He led the league in steals twice. And I don't know how, but he never made an all-defensive team. But I feel like he was one of the best defenders in the league the whole time he played.
Wow. It's funny. He started out at Vincennes University and then transferred to another school.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I do agree. It's funny you say that because he was when I was trying to remember when I was saying about my small forward, and I'll explain this later because I thought we were each going to pick a team and I was actually going to use 2 power forwards. So, but at any rate, I wasn't sure. I thought he was a small forward.
Yeah, but I mean, I think on the Suns, he played power forward. They were playing their small ball and stuff like that.
And so that's why I'm saying I agree. I mean, they're pretty interchangeable, right? Because depending on the type of offense you're running, because we've seen LeBron play center before and point guard.
Yeah.
So, yeah, get a lot of those mixes. So that makes sense. But that's a good pick because I've thought of him as well because he doesn't get much notice. And he was he had an ugly looking shot. He could hit threes too.
Yeah, it was tough.
For mine, originally I was going to put Charles Barkley because I feel like he's been overshadowed in his post-playing career because everyone thinks he's an idiot and he's just a funny guy. He was a tremendous basketball player, absolutely tremendous. But I think people think, oh, he's the fat guy who Shaq makes fun of. No, yes, that's true and it's great, but he was tremendous. But I actually went with someone else. I actually went with Chris Webber. His career averages are 20.7 points per game, 9.8 rebounds, and 4.2 assists. He was hurt a lot, and I know that probably hurts his case. But even during those games, the games he did play each season, his numbers were fantastic. He averaged double digits. I mean, he averaged double-doubles for maybe 6 or 7 different seasons. 5-time All-NBA. He was Rookie of the Year when he came into the league. But I think he's massively underrated. You know, he played on those good Kings teams in the early 2000s. So yeah, Chris Webber's my pick. I almost put Charles Barkley, but I'm like, he's an all-time great. People just think he's an idiot. I'm like, people just don't know about him. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kyle, who you got for power forward then?
Well, funny you say that. So I just mentioned how I was originally building a team, and Charles Barkley was going to be one of them. So I put him as my small forward. And then my pick for power forward would have been, and who I'm picking now, is actually Karl Malone. Dude is top 5 scores. I think he's been passed. At one point, I think he got to number 2 on the list. People don't know that.
He's third
What's
right
that?
now. I think he's third right now.
Third, I think so too. Yeah, I think as well. But, I mean, people don't even know that. You know, I mean, this guy was great, and he was great for a very long period of time. You know, he went up. It's like you said earlier, though, right? He went up against Jordan in his prime. It's hard to win. Barkley did too. But what they did, you know, for his whole career, he's on the Dream Team. I mean, again, how many people even know he was on the Dream Team? You know, a lot of people, I think, forget that he was on it. I think more people probably know Christian Laettner was on it because he kind of, you know, stood out. He was kind of the sore thumb of the pick there. But, you know, that I agree totally. And also to your point too, Sammy, about Charles Barkley. I love Charles Barkley as a player. I love him as an analyst, and I love his politics. I hope that dude runs for president because I'll vote for him.
I really like Charles Barkley. I don't think he's as stupid as people think he is. He just gets mixed up sometimes.
Oh, no, I'm being very sincere. I think he's actually highly intelligent. He just messes around a lot, and people don't realize that he's a sharp individual.
I liked in the early 90s, he talked about how, you know, all these kids look up to professional athletes, and he made a point of having because he was with Nike. He signed with Nike for whatever, and he told Nike, "I'm going to do it. Let's do a commercial, and during it, I'm going to say I'm not a role model. Like, I play basketball. Your parents should raise you. That's not my business. So I'll do it. Like, I'll do what I want. I'm just a ball player." And honestly, he's right. He is a role. He's a professional athlete that kids look up to, but at the end of the day, that's really none of his business. He's just a basketball player. He shouldn't be raising anybody's kids.
Yeah, I agree. And that's all good as long as they don't cross that line of trying to be influential, you know, positive things. And I don't think he ever did that. I think he stayed true to that. And but I thought he was with Fila, because I had a pair of Barkleys growing up, didn't he?
It might have been. I think he might have switched at some point.
Yeah, because I'm just going to say, that's the only thing I'll dog Charles Barkley on. That was the worst pair of basketball shoes I ever had. The traction wore out of those in a month. I had to buy a new pair of shoes. They were horrible.
Well, it's better than Shaq tried to get his own shoe, and like the logo was him dunking, and they were just piece of crap shoes.
Yeah.
Like
the and ones.
Yeah, nice. But yeah, I don't know. It's funny. All right. So I guess we'll move on to centers. I'll start. This player I hadn't even heard of until like a couple weeks ago, and then I thought of him last night when I was thinking about this stuff. So I looked him up, looked up his numbers. Have you guys heard of Mark Eaton?
Yeah,
I've seen guys.
He was like 7'3" or something, wasn't he?
Yeah. He's a big 7'4" white guy.
Yeah.
He made like it. It's just crazy how. So for his career. He averaged 3.5 blocks a game, NBA record. Another NBA record is he averaged 5.6 blocks per game in a season. And then he also has the NBA record for a playoff playoff season of 5.8 blocks per game. 4-time block leader, 5-team All Defensive, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. You know, people could argue, well, he's tall, why wouldn't he get blocks? Roy Hibbert was 7'2", and he barely averaged a block a game. I mean, there's skill to blocking people.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's more than just being tall. But so, averaging almost 6 blocks a game.
That's crazy.
Season. That's some people's career high is 6 blocks. So
yeah,
it's astounding how good of he wasn't really a good scorer, and he wasn't even that great of a rebounder. But my goodness, he could block the ball. And yeah, he's my pick for that. just a giant guy that played for the Jazz in the 80s, Mark Eaton.
I like that one. That's a good one. I'd heard of him. I didn't know all that about him, though. Yeah, that's
I had no idea it's that good.
I don't know if anyone would break any of those records. Like 6 blocks a game for a season. That's
no, like there's talent with that. That's just not being. If it was just being tall, that's easy, right? But it's there's a lot more to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so Wyatt, who do you got for your center?
My center pick, it's kind of a stretch for a center. He's definitely more of a small ball center if he plays center. He's not like a traditional center, but I pick Elton Brand. For his first 8 seasons, he averaged 20 and 10. He averaged 20 and 9 one season, but 20 and 10 pretty much for his first 8 seasons. He didn't have like the longest career, the longest prime or whatever, but he was really consistent when he was at the top of his game. So I think he's pretty underrated. Nobody really talks about him much.
I agree with that because he played. Who did he play? He started with the Bulls.
For Clippers.
Bulls, Clippers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good pick. I almost put him on my power forward.
Yeah, I was just saying. I'm a huge Duke fan, so I love the Elton Brand choice there. And he had a great career, and he's hardly talked about at all. I think he got a little bit popular when he was in Chicago, but he never really got any of his much of his dues when he was there in LA.
Now, Kyle, if we were talking modern NBA, most underrated players, I'd almost put J.J. Reddick.
J.J. Reddick. That's the answer. No, it is answered. And I thought about saying it today, but I knew I'd get called a lot of names. But he is.
I think he's a good player. He's done a lot over his career. I wouldn't blame you for putting him.
Good.
Yeah, I all joking aside, I think you could at least make the argument that he's one of the most underrated or underappreciated players of the modern era. There's definitely others that would be in there, but he's consistently, and especially if you look where he came from. Obviously, as you guys know, I followed Duke at that time hardcore. He's my favorite player of all time. And I remember the talks. Oh, he's not as good as Adam Morrison. He won't make it in the NBA. He doesn't play defense. He's not athletic enough. Well, all that was complete bull crap. Adam Morrison, he didn't make it, which I feel bad for him, but he didn't. Yeah. Reddick, man, I remember when he wasn't playing in Orlando, he told the coach, I think at the time it was Van Gundy was the coach, I think. And he's like, hey, play me or trade me. Well, for a guy like him who hadn't really done anything in the league and didn't have much expectations, and back then Orlando was good. I think Jameer Nelson was there, a few others, and they said, yeah, absolutely. And so it's like, okay, for him to do that, and I thought it was a ballsy move. Eventually he did get to move on, and he's had a phenomenal career. I've watched several of his games where he scored 25 points, and he does extremely well for himself.
I actually this past Friday, he has a podcast, and I listened to the episode of Jimmy Butler, and they're talking about their time on the Sixers. I thought that was hilarious because he was the 6th man for a title contender last season. He's a great.
Yep. Yeah, and it's funny. I was excited when he went to the Sixers because they were such a young team, and he could kind of bring some of that veteran leadership. But he didn't have to be the star of the show. He could still let them do their thing. And thought they'd be a little bit better than what they end up being, so far, but we'll see. But I knew he had a podcast. I haven't heard it yet. Maybe he'll find our podcast, and then maybe I can go on his and make the whole thing come full circle.
Okay. So Kyle, did you say your center yet? I forgot.
I haven't. And this is the one I struggle with and struggle. The one that I'm going to pick again, people know him, but when you watch him play, if you look back, he was phenomenal, especially more so in college, but even the NBA, Patrick Ewing. He never got a title, but if you look at the teams that were put together around him, for the most part, it was like LeBron James in the early Cleveland years. They were putting scrubs with him. He had no one to help him. Now, they did later on. They had a couple decent players, but he was that team. And, you were talking earlier about blocks and that type of thing and how hard those are to come by. And, he could get blocks, rebounds, and he scored. I just think he was a phenomenal player that never gets mentioned. Usually when you hear centers, it's, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell. And those guys are all good. And to a degree, I think you hear more about Kevin McHale. And I'm a huge Celtic fan, but I don't think there's a comparison there. I think Patrick Ewing was much better than Kevin McHale.
Yeah, I absolutely. Absolutely. I think people – I think, again, it's like what you were saying with Patrick Ewing was he never had – I mean, John Starks, he was a pretty solid player, but that was the best thing he had.
That's like his best player, too. That's like the best one he ever got with John Starks.
Yeah, he just didn't have anything around him.
And that's nothing against John Starks because he was a hard-working player. I'd say he was even underrated, but he wasn't a sidekick for a championship team. He wasn't Scottie Pippen. He wasn't, Clyde Drexler with Olajuwon. I mean, it's not the same thing. And with Ewing,
I think they did have. Did they have? Now that I'm saying, did Charles Oakley, was he there for a little bit when Ewing was there? I think he was.
Yeah, he put him the next.
But here's the thing, though, right? It's kind of like when Shaquille O'Neal went to play with LeBron. The dude was past his prime. Yeah, he wasn't doing anything anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think people look at Patrick Ewing and probably throw injuries at him. I don't know if that affected his career that much. He had a solid career.
He did.
He was injured.
He always put good.
And I just thought of talking to the Magic. I think Dwight Howard has been massively underappreciated about this past 7 or 8 years, just because I'm all right with Dwight Howard. I think he's an idiot, but ever since he left the Magic, I think people just crapped on him. I mean, he's stupid, but he's still been a pretty decent center during that time. And from the time he came into the league, pretty much until he left the Magic, he was the best center in the NBA. I know you like Pau Gasol, but it was Dwight Howard for like a 9-year stretch. It was Dwight
Howard. He always puts up good numbers. Like, he's always double-double guy.
Yeah.
Well, here's my issue with Dwight Howard. I don't disagree with what you're saying. And there was a time I liked Dwight Howard. The problem I have is somebody who I'm hesitant to say he doesn't love the game of basketball. I'm hesitant to say he's lazy. But he has some of those traits about him, just the way he talks. It's hard for me to give anybody props when they don't seem to really care about the game and love the game. And that's just the vibe I get from him. So I don't like mentioning him in that category. But you're not wrong, Sammy, with what you're saying about – I would agree. There would have been a time he would have definitely been underappreciated because he was – and there was a, 3-year span there. I mean, he dominated.
I mean, he was averaging
oh yeah.
And he was averaging 24, 25 points a game. And that's not even the modern center that's shooting threes. I mean, those were all scoring at the rim.
Yes.
And that's I don't know. I mean, he was, I don't know. If he kept it up for another 4 or 5 years, I think he was excellent during that time with the Magic.
Let me throw this out to you two and tell me what you think on this. It kills me. I hated him growing up, and I mean hated this guy with a passion. I thought the refs let him get away with absolute murder. I didn't think he had very much basketball skill. But going back and trying to look at it more objectively, Shaquille O'Neal never gets mentioned as one of the all-time greats. But just like Wilt Chamberlain, the dude dominated his era. When he was in his prime, to me, Kobe Bryant goes down 3 championships. Kobe Bryant did not have to be on that Lakers team. They still would have won those 3. As long as they had a halfway decent was good with them to championships. And this dude never gets props for taking teams to championships. I love Dwayne Wade. Dude's great. He would never have won a title without Shaq. Shaq could have still taken that team. So, I mean, he just does not get the respect, in my opinion, that he deserves. He went a lot of different places. He can handle the ball. I remember watching All-Star games, him goofing around. That's what kind of changed my mind about his overall basketball skill. And I don't know. Tell me what you guys think about that.
I think that's funny. That's interesting you say that because without a doubt in my head, I think Shaq's the greatest center of all time. No debate. Players from the 50s and 60s, it's hard for me to
I agree. That's what I'm saying.
It's like Bill Russell's very arrogant about him being the best ever. He got 15 points a game, but then averaged 53 against a bunch of 5'10" white guys. Shaq was out there, and you couldn't guard him. You couldn't guard him. Like I think without question, Shaq's the greatest center of all time. Like no debate.
I agree.
Kareem's second, but I think Shaq's a better player than he was.
Well, I say Wilt Chamberlain. I think Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell are the closest that you could mention to his dominance of the game, his dominance. And outside of that, I agree with you. Kareem was great. But you never hear these talks with Shaq. You never hear, like, hey, this is top 5 player. This dude has a legit reason to be on the Rushmore. There's an argument for it, and you don't hear it. But go ahead, Wyatt.
Yeah, I went back and watched, like, when they played the Pacers in the finals. I went back and watched, like, 3 or 4 of those games on YouTube, and, like, you just can't. He's just too big. And he's just too massive. Like, he's in 40-20 games, like, it's nothing. Like, it doesn't even seem like he's trying out there and getting 40-20.
No, that's exactly it.
Like, on my all-time list of rankings of the players, I have Shaq at 5. Like, I think he's top 5 best.
Interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. I haven't done that in a long time, but I see your point to it, absolutely, especially if you're going to say, who's my starting 5 greatest players, so you got to put a center in there. The only reason I didn't mention him is the most underrated was just simply because most people still do have a ton of respect for him, but I just think they don't have as much as they should.
I agree. I think it's the same thing Charles Barkley has, but to an lesser extent.
Correct.
They just see, like, the other day on Inside the NBA, he got up from his camera early and he had underwear on. People look at that, oh, Shaq's funny. He's in the General Insurance commercials. Shaq would also eat everyone's lunch every single game. He didn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
go ahead, Wyatt.
I feel like people think he's one of the greats, but he's never in the conversation for, like, one of the greatest.
Exactly. No, and the other thing, again, guys, can't emphasize this. I hated him when he played. Hated watching him because it's no fun. Nobody could do anything. And I always felt like the refs let him get away with murder, which I still do believe they let him get away with a little bit more. But at the same time, other people fouled the crap out of him, and he rarely went to the line. Not that he would have made the free throws. But if you look back at his skill, because then I started thinking, well, how hard is it to be that good when you're that big? Well, here's the thing, though. It's hard to be that good when you're that big. And so you have to give him props for owning his skills and his footwork. I think there's a story at one time that he took, like, ballet classes to help with his footwork. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but he was amazing.
I remember I saw this video. I think it's when he played with the Suns. So, I mean, he was well on his way out of being good. But first game of the NBA season, soon as the ball is tipped, the Spurs fouled him immediately. He looked around, and it showed Greg Popovich going like this. just like hack a Shaq immediately. And Greg Popovich just was giving him thumbs up from the bench, going like you suck. So, yeah.
Awesome.
We have less than a minute left before this shuts off because there's the 40-minute timer. I'm glad we got through everything, so that's good.
We did.
Yeah. All right. It was great talking to you guys. We need to do this again. Maybe, like, at the end of the 8 games, we can have another one, talk about how the season's going to go. But, yeah, I'll see you guys later.
That sounds good, man. Good seeing you guys.
See ya.
Mm-hmm. Yep.